Okay, new signing. Dolphins are expected to sign former Bills first-round pass rusher Shaq Lawson, sources say. He had 6.5 sacks last year and will help Miami affect the quarterback. Ian Rappaport coming in clutch just in time. Shaq Lawson to the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins #1. They got their new edge rusher for their defense in Brian Flores. They desperately needed edge rushers, and they get one. Now, Shaq Lawson had one of his best seasons last year, if not his best season last year. He was kind of an interesting name in free agency because you didn't know if the Bills were interested in re-signing him or not. He's a former first-rounder. He's shown some bright spots, but also shown inconsistency. And that's the type of player that I feel like can always be a value in free agency. Sometimes guys like Shaq Lawson are just in the wrong system. They're on the wrong team. They're being coached by the wrong coach. And oftentimes I wouldn't say that about Sean McDermott, who's an excellent defensive coach. But you could say that potentially there is always the possibility that Shaq Lawson was in the wrong system. And it's a different system that Brian Flores will be running. He wants a specific type of player. And I do think Lawson will be a little bit more stand-up, a little bit more blitzing-oriented in Miami. He had his best season last year in terms of pass rush productivity, playing 15 games. He had 6.5 sacks. He had 18 quarterback hits. He had 13 tackles for loss. He was a productive player on the edge, and he did not start for them. He was a rotationary player. I do think that he'll probably start more often in Miami. And when looking at Miami's depth chart, they definitely needed this type of player. Now, does this keep them out of the Jadeveon Clowney conversation? That's interesting. Because they really, looking at their edge position, I mean, they have Charles Harris and really no one else of note. And even most people here probably don't know who Charles Harris is. Their interior defensive line is not horrible. They drafted Christian Wilkins. They could re-sign John Jenkins. They also signed Taco Charlton last season. But their linebackers aren't bad, but I do expect them to continue to add to the edge position. I think this is the start of it. I think this is the start of them doing that. I want to see the contract. Shaq Lawson, good player, good pass rusher, young. He is only 26 in 2020. He ranked 52nd at the edge position for PFF. He had a good grade, had a higher pass rush grade than a run defense grade, and I think will be a nice piece. I don't think he'll cost a ton. I want to hear the contract information. The Dolphins are giving Shaq Lawson a 3-year deal worth $30 million, a nice payday for Shaq Lawson. Yeah, I mean, this is a very similar contract to what they just gave to... They gave Eric Flowers the exact same deal. 3 years, $30 million. And they're very similar players. They're both first-round picks a few seasons ago that have a lot of physical potential and a lot of talent, but are just reaching that talent. It's interesting. It's almost like a strategy the Dolphins are doing here, are going after. That's fascinating. What do you guys think of the Dolphins' strategy to go after these former first-round picks that are just starting to prove their worth in the NFL and just starting to hit their prime? He makes about the same amount of money as Jerry Hughes, who's his former teammate. Slightly more than Sue, slightly more than Derek Wolfe, more than Sheard, Ansah. Interesting. I think that's a fair contract for Shaq Lawson. It might be a little much, but I mean, for a free agency contract, that is pretty fair. Like, there's players that are below him that are better than him that have lower contracts, but that's because really it's because they were either rookies, they're still on their rookie contract, or they're veterans who've outplayed their contract and they'll be looking for a new deal. So $10 million, I don't think it's bad. 3 years. But I'm just really fascinated to see what the Dolphins are doing in this free agency, giving these players with a lot of potential these 3-year contracts, hope, and I think their hope is that those players will outdo their contracts, outperform their contracts, and ultimately be a bargain because they know that they were formerly highly regarded. And a lot of teams that often get a lot of steals, like the Patriots or like the Ravens, like the Seahawks, often go with this approach, and I think it's smart. The Miami Dolphins have once again added another weapon to their edge position, another complementary piece to get after the quarterback. Emmanuel Ogbah of the Kansas City Chiefs has signed with the Miami Dolphins on a 2-year, $15 million deal with 7.5 of it guaranteed. So about half of it is guaranteed. Ogbah is an underrated player. I believe I listed him as one of my underrated edge players of this offseason, and now the Dolphins have completely revamped this entire position. I mean, adding Van Noy, adding Shaq Lawson, and adding Ogbah. Now they have a bunch of different guys. Van Noy can play edge, or he could play linebacker. He could play a little bit of both. Ogbah and Lawson are two young players that they signed to a little bit lesser of contract than going out there and going for the big guys on the market. I like this move a lot. When he was playing last year, he was really, really good for the Chiefs. He's a good pass rusher. He's still very young. He's athletic, and I think he fits this defense very well. This is another piece for Flores to utilize in the pass rush. Looking at how he ranked last season for Kansas City, he ranked 40th for Kansas City, which was their highest ranked edge defender by PFF. He played 410 snaps and was a starter when he was playing, but he did get injured at the end of the season. Looking at some of his former statistics, let's just take a look here. I really like what Miami has done. You know, I love the Byron Jones signing. I love that they've added him to Howard. Now they have a shutdown corner duo, and they have some athletic guys up front that can make plays. So he's only going to be 27. He was 26 this past season. He played 10 games, had 5.5 sacks for Kansas City, which was arguably his best season yet. He had 11 quarterback hits and 6 tackles for loss. I think he fits this defense. You could do some of the things that he did in Kansas City. He also played in Cleveland from 2016 to 2018, from 23 years old to 25 years old. 5.5 sacks in his rookie year in 2016, 4 sacks, and then 3 sacks in 2017 and 2018. This is a guy that I still feel has a ton of potential to develop. He was a former pretty high draft pick in the second round for the Cleveland Browns in 2016. I believe that was the draft. He was 32nd overall, so that was the draft where New England didn't have a first-round pick, I believe. So he was technically a first-round pick. So Ogbah, a lot of potential still left in this guy that I think Brian Flores can squeeze out of him, and you potentially have a guy on a really cheap contract that could be a diamond in the rough for this defense and develop into a really good pass rusher. Again, another excellent move. Great value for the Miami Dolphins on the defensive side of the football, and they're continuing to build this defense forward. We'll have to see what they do at the quarterback position, whether that's the draft or free agency. We'll have to see if they continue to develop that offensive line and sign guys on the offensive line and work on this offense. But so far, the defense is looking like it's going to take huge leaps forward in 2020. So Ogbah to the Dolphins.